Okay, we're going to keep working with greatest common factors, but we're going to try a different strategy here. I'm not saying this strategy is any better, but I'm going to use prime factors instead of what I've used before. And here's what let me just jump right in so you can see what I mean by that. So if you're supposed to find the greatest common factor of 28 and 70, here's what we did first. We said, okay, let's take 28 and 70. Whoops. And we'll write out the common factor. We'll write out the factors of each one. So 1 and 28, 2 and 14, and see, 3 doesn't go in, 4 goes in 7 times, and that's it. Okay, there's no more factors of 28. Let's try 70. Well, 1 and 70, 2 and 35. Let's see, 3 doesn't go in, 4 doesn't go in, 5 goes in. How many times? 14. Okay, 6, no, 7 and 10, 8, no, 9, no, 10, we've already got it. Okay, we're done. Okay, so if you look at the common factors, of course 1 and 2, they've got a 7 in common and a 14 in common. And the greatest common factor is 14. Well, I want you to notice something. If I'm going to take those two numbers, 28 and 70, and I'm going to break them apart using to find their prime factorization. If you don't mind, I'm going to use the ladder method just because I like it better. So you can divide 28 by 2, you get 14. You can divide that by 2, you get 7, and 7's prime, so I'm done. I can take 70 and do the same thing. It divides by 2 and gets 35. That doesn't divide by 2 anymore. It doesn't divide by 3, but it does divide by 5, and I get 7. Okay. Well, I want you to notice something. Our GCF that we got before, greatest common factor, was 14. And if I break 14 up into its factors, I get 2 and 7. Well, look at this. Here's 2 and here's 7. Okay? So what I'm going to use is a strategy that says, look, let me just write out all the prime factorizations for each number, in this case 28 and 70, and I make a note of which things they have in common. Okay? In this case, they had a 2 in common and they had a 7 in common. And what I'll end up doing is just multiplying those numbers together to get the greatest common factor. So let's try another one here with similar things. Here's 28 and 40. So I'm just going to go straight at it. I'm going to write 28 and 40 and use the ladder method. Just like I said, I like it better. Divides by 2, you get 14. It divides by 2, you get 7, just like we got before. This one divides by 2, you get 20. It divides by 2, you get 10. That divides by 2, and you get 5. Okay? And now what I'm going to do is say, look, they've got a 2 in common here, another 2 in common there, and those are the only things that they have in common. Okay? So what I'm going to do is say, look, the greatest common factor is going to have to be divisible by 2 and 2 again, so I'm going to multiply them together and get 4. Now just to be sure, let's check it. Let's take 28 and 40 and write it out like we did before. 1 goes in 28 times, 2 goes in 14 times, 3 doesn't go in, 4 goes in 7 times, okay? And then 1 and 40, 2 and 20, 3 didn't go in, 4 went in 10 times, and 5 and 8. Okay? And if I look at all the things they've got in common, they've got a 1 in common, they've got a 2 in common, they've got a 4 in common, and that's it. There's no other common factors, so 4 indeed is its greatest common factor. So let's do one more just to show how this thing's working. Now, honestly, when I ask you what the greatest common factor of 24 and 56 is, unless I specifically say use the prime factorization method or just write out the factors and look for the greatest common factor, honestly, I don't care which method you use. Okay, really, I mean, do whichever one you want. Unless I specifically say just pick the one that works better for you. Okay, I'm going to use this method here just to show you again how this works. I'm going to take 24 and 56 and I'm going to break it up into its prime factorization. So 2 goes in 12 times. You can divide 12 by 2, you get 6. You can divide 6 by 2 and get 3, and 3 is prime. Okay. You can divide 56 by 2 and you get 28. You can divide 28 by 2, you get 14. You can divide 14 by 2, you get 7, and 7 is prime, so I'm done. Okay? So what I'm going to do again is say, look, they've got a 2 in common, another 2 in common, and another 2 in common. And that's it. Okay? So I'll just multiply those three numbers together, 2, 2, 2, and get 8. And there's my greatest common factor. So to me, that works a little nicer. Again, you can choose whichever method you want, unless I or your teacher, if you're not one of my students, specifies which method you should use. Then hey, knock yourself out. You know, switch back and forth if you want, or use one, not the other. Doesn't matter. All right. Hope that helps. Oh, and if you're taking my class, I'm going to ask you to do a quizzes on these things, finding the greatest common factor, and I just did the first 3 problems on it.